ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this seminar marking the historic 100th anniversary of the birth of our beloved leader and emancipator, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Today's seminar is a joint venture of the Southern Asian Institute of Columbia University and Vision. Today, we not only salute Dr. Ambedkar, but also this great institution, the Columbia University, which produced such a great scholar like Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar, the illustrious alumnus of Columbia University, was proudly declared that this hallowed institution was a fertile ground in which his liberation philosophy nurtured and matured. On this occasion, let's take a minute or two to reflect upon the global dimensions of human rights perspective that comes to us through the vision of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, by far the most distinguished, the foremost human rights champion and intellectual giant of the 20th century. To give you that important dimension, here are several eminent and scholarly speakers whose commitment to our cause and whose understanding from a layman. I do not suggest either the eloquence or the gift of the gap to do the justice to the task. So I have a great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, in inviting Dr. Yengde, acting in Southern Asian Institute, Columbia University, to be the moderator of this morning session. Professor Yengde.
Thank you, Suraj. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this seminar. There are a number of distinguished speakers this morning who I'll introduce as they come, but our first speaker this morning is Dean Jack Greenberg. Dean Greenberg is the Dean of Columbia College. He is one of the foremost spokesmen for human rights in the United States. He has long been involved with human rights in this country. He's also a friend of India, has made many trips there, well acquainted with the situation in India.
College, which is the undergraduate college of Columbia University. Then I am also chairman of Asia Watch, a human rights organization concerned with human rights in Asia, which is part of a larger organization, Human Rights Watch, which monitors human rights elsewhere in the world. And as one who loves India and traveled there whenever he's had an opportunity. I'm about to call attention to some important shortcomings, defects, and injustices in the Indian prison system. But just to place it in proper perspective, I think I'll start out by talking about the United States first, where I came to Columbia Law School. Virtually every prison system in the United States is under court order, requiring it to shape up its practices in what broadly might be called the areas of human rights. American prisons have been overcrowded. The sanitary conditions have been intolerable. Torture and beatings have been common. Summary punishment has been widespread. And medical care has been poor. And there has been just intolerable conditions that have been the subject of lawsuits that have improved those conditions in a great many situations, but the nature of imprisonment or indeed conditions of this sort are such that as soon as attention flags, the old situation returns. The problem is prevalent around is that prisons are obscure, they're out of the way. They generally house the least privileged or admired members of society. It's likely that the job of prison guard attracts people with certain kinds of sadistic personalities. Whatever accounts for it is certainly something one finds in many parts of the world. And India is no exception. Now, recently, Asia Watch sent a mission to India to India is a democracy and it's open, so it's possible to see people and you can see public officials and lawyers and ex-prisoners and obtain information. And that information has been gathered in a report, and I would like to refer to and perhaps read to you some sections of that report. An abuse of police custody. Women have complained of being whipped with belts, especially on the thigh and upper leg, or being hung with a pole around the back. Again, these are just brief excerpts to give you an idea of the conditions that we discussed. Most interesting, and I think Dr. Ambedkar himself would have been interested in this, quite probably was, the class system in the prison. Perhaps the most prominent artifact from India's colonial past is the classification scheme for prisoners. The directives lay down...
Touching many of the themes that Jack Greenberg has introduced us to. And indeed, the next speaker comes out of the same general academic world as Jack Greenberg, and that is Professor Mark Callander of the University of Wisconsin. Mark Callander, as far as I know, one of the very few scholars of Indian law in this country, and he's going to speak on a subject that is of enormous interest in India at the present time, and that is the Mandal Commission. Professor Callander.
Thank you, Ainsley, and morning to you all. I'm very honored to be here as part of this celebration of Dr. Ambedkar's centenary. I want to use my time to examine the controversy that would surely engage him if he were still among us, one in which the trenchantcy and political wisdom of Dr. Ambedkar is certainly sorely missing. Among the numerous crises that had racked Indian polity during the last year was this lethal controversy about about the government's decision to implement the Mandal Commission, which after all is a report that was 10 years old at the time. And this furor is more than an episode of political warfare, surely is that, but I think it is more, it touches a nerve that connects with India's vision of itself and its future. So Mandal and its reception really recapitulate a lot of the It spans a society of legendary hierarchy and inequality. The Constitution contemplated a government that would somehow act to mitigate those inequalities in wealth, education, and power, and in pursuing that, the government was specifically forbidden to everybody who's backward compared to the top rather than compared to the average. It identifies those other backward classes on the basis of their membership in caste. Although interestingly, it displays some difficulty in separating out two very different ways of talking about caste when you're talking about backwardness. You can talk about caste as the social units whose backwardness you're going to measure. Alternatively, you can talk about caste as a rank or status that serves as a measuring rod for determining the backwardness of those units. In the discourse about backward classes, it's very easy to conflate these, and it's very difficult to keep them separate. Mandal clearly applies caste in both these senses. It uses caste as the units as backwardness is going to be measured, along with the jati-like formations among the non-Hindu in India, and proposes to use caste standing as the measuring rod. It identifies the OBCs as those considered as socially backward by others.
Well, friends, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to take part in the celebration of the life and the work of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, a great visionary and a great political leader and a great spokesman for the rights and the vision and the dignity of all peoples everywhere. I want to celebrate Dr. Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar's work by putting it into context. In our framework, if Dr. Ambedkar stood for anything, it was certainly for the rights, the dignity, the role, the enlargement of opportunities of all peoples. And yet in another sense, within an Indian context, you might say that his work was not so much for human rights, but for a humane dharma. That is to say, to reconceive and to rethink fundamental social morality within an Indian context in a way that would enlarge and accept all. The reason why I use the term humane dharma rather than human rights to characterize movements of social reform of which Dr. Ambedkar's was a part, because a number of observers have claimed that in India, in a sense, rights in a Western context cannot possibly exist. Because rights, at least as we conceive it, is based upon a notion of social morality in which individuals, in their individual aspiration, are fundamentally equal and are to be thought of as isolated individuals with an equal opportunity within a larger social frame. The observation made by Louis Dumont and others is that the moral vision of India is fundamentally different from that of the modern West, in that it's communitarian. People are born into specific social communities. They think of social morality within that communitarian framework. And that communitarian framework is essentially one of obligation, not of rights. Individuals are born not so much with a sense of individual and equal rights with others, but of moral obligations as a part of particular social communities, as part of a particular moment within their lives, as there is a dharma for each stage of life, as a part of their political role, as a Raj dharma. There is, of course, in a sense, an individual dharma, but ultimately, and perhaps most important, there is a collective dharma, an obligation to one's caste. And in this framework, then, to reform and to rethink of social morality within India in a way that would enlarge the social vision and to give equal dignity to all people, one has to seriously confront dharma and to think of dharma in more humane terms. No question that the Western notion of the individual, equal individual rights model of social morality is one that is behind much of India's political rhetoric. It's behind much of the regulations such as the Mongol Commission report. It is a vision of many people in urban India. But Dr. Ambedkar, among other leaders within India, recognized that if one were to confront fundamental India, timeless India, traditional India, one had to confront dharma. So many of the movements for social reform within India, and those especially led by members of the Shudra caste and other social reformers themselves, have had to confront dharma.
Thank you, Professor. Professor of Science in India, someplace here to discuss the human rights issue. But I was very much impressed with Professor Mark Garanter and also Dean Greensburg and also Dean W. McMahon for a tremendous amount of research they did in the human rights issue pertinent to India. It's very impressive. It's unfortunate that many of the people belonging to this oppressed class are so wrapped up in their day-to-day activities. They could not find much time to do much research in this area. As Dean Greensburg pointed out, the conditions in the Indian prisons is pretty bad. Believe it or not, it's quite possible the conditions outside the prison may be as bad but also I think they are equally bad, maybe even worse than that. But the people in the prisons happen to have only the certain limitations, but people outside the prisons happen to have a limitation that's not very easy to accommodate in the mental plane. And also, Professor Garanter pointed out that there is a lack of some tangible device or tangible evidence of result of the 50 years of reservation that have been made by the Indian government. And they think it's about time the Indian government should take this issue very seriously and come up with some kind of missionary or some kind of agency to evaluate how this progress has been made or not. If not, why it is made. What seems to be the obstacles, what seems to be the hurdles that seems to prevent the further progress of these things.
Thank you, Dr. Edward. It's a great privilege and very fortunate that I'm able to participate in this conference. It's so fortunate because this is once in a lifetime. In the next 100 years, I won't be here to participate. It's so honored to be here. We talked about human rights. India being a unique country, they have unique meaning for the word human rights. I don't think India has the same meaning in their whole dictionary for the words human rights. To go back to the real meaning of human rights in India, you have to go back to the origin of the Hindu religion. That is where they take the meanings. And that is one source. Then they're coming back about 50 years back, that same meaning have been reinforced by the protector of Hinduism, Mr. Mohandas Karamchand. Particularly purposely avoiding the word Gandhi because Gandhi is not his given name. That is his caste name. He did not even disassociate his caste name because he was a caste man and he died as caste man. But let me come back to that a second. First, let me go back to the Hindu religious guidelines to so-called the Hindu human rights. Go back to Manu Dharma, the guy who wrote the guidelines, the rules and the laws of the Hindu religion. He says, Brahma, the god, has intended from eternity that the untouchables should be born slaves and live as slaves and die as slaves. How do you expect the Hindus to have different meanings of human rights? This is their reason. They can't go against the religious teachings. Slavery is inborn among the Shudras, and no one can free them from it. No one can. United Nations Human Rights Organization cannot do that. US government's restrictions cannot do that. So I think what we are really talking is peripheral. The Indian government or the Indian people consisting mainly of the Hindus. For them, their religious teachings are the prime, the important ones. A Shudra who does no service to Brahmin is still a slave. A Shudra is a born slave. Food gets polluted by the smell of a pig, by the looks of a dog, and the touch of a slave. This is all coming from Manu Dharma. He has very clearly written. As a matter of fact, he says, a Shudra that behaves contrary to the injunctions of the Vedas and the Smritis against the Britishers. But he didn't expect the Britishers to do the penance because they were the Britishers were the people ruling India. He had different guidelines from the Britishers. But when it came to untouchables, who were practicing Sajjada or agitating, he goes and says, no, you can't do that. That is for the Hindus. When are the Hindus going to change their mind and let the untouchables get into the temples? He says also, don't ask for freedom. He's telling the untouchables, don't ask for your freedom because it will enrage your masters. And the master will in turn ill-treat you. So what he said to the untouchables, don't you ever go and ask for your freedom. If you do that, he is going to kick you. So keep going down. Keep on till the master thinks it's time that he can let the untouchables have little human rights. During 1930s, when Dr. Gare, he was a chief minister of one of the provinces and central provinces. When he formed his ministry, he had one untouchable in his cabinet. Because he thought, by mistake, Gandhi was in fact saying that we need to uplift the Indian untouchables. Gandhi took Dr. Garre to task and he made him to resign his ministry so that that particular untouchable minister will no more in the cabinet. And then another ministry was formed without a representation from the untouchables. For that he says, it was wrong to arouse such high ambitions with the untouchables. Dr. Garre has created this temptation to the simple community. So what he said is, so don't tempt these innocent, ignorant people. They're happy where they are, let them be where they are. Then he goes on about the rich people of India. He said, the rich people of India are the trustees of the poor. And as such, they hold the riches of the country as the trustees of the poor. So, let the rich man have the riches, let them enjoy it. Let's not go and fight against them, try not to take property because they're the trustees of the poor people. What kind of sense it has, I don't know. But obviously, Gandhi knew what he was talking about. Regarding the Western customs and mechanizations of automation, Gandhi said, to adopt Western European social system means that Hindus must give up the principles of hereditary occupation, which is the soul of the caste system. Hereditary principle is an eternal principle. To change it, to destroy the caste system and create disorder. It will be the chaos if every day the Brahmin is to be changed into a Shudra and a Shudra is to be changed to a Brahmin.
Here and are ready to sit down and attack the Indian social structure when they themselves have been practicing the most brutal form of apartheid. If you had seen the series Separate but Equal, would have told you what is happening here and is happening to this very day. Now comes a Professor Dr. Annamalai, gave a very vitriolic speech. Now I am not saying that there is no suppression of the lower caste in India, but there are ways of handling it, and I think a lot is being done in India. Any social change needs a few generations. You cannot press a button today and say, there, untouchability is eradicated. I would like to say that in USA, a black is a black is a black, no matter whether he's in New York, California, or Hawaii. But in India, if you happen to be belonging to a lower caste, an untouchable in Bombay, you can go and get a certificate, change your name to an upper caste and go to another part of India and your past is eradicated. But in the USA you could not do it. And he has been quoting several things out of context from Manusmriti, from Gandhi's writings. Let me tell you a few things. I can also then have the right to quote out of context. In the Ramayana, and a passage of Ramayana, an incident from Ramayana which has...
I was thinking that if merit is so important, or meritocracy, which you can call, then perhaps some Western countries, there may be a lot of people who are meritorious and well to answer question paper. They should go to Africa and Asia, various countries, maybe to India. Well, these days they may not be able to beat all the Indians to secure highest positions. But at the time of independence, certainly most of the Britishers, a lot of Britishers who have been able to beat most Indians in writing examinations or measuring somehow merit. So that cannot, I mean, you wouldn't agree, or nobody would agree that, okay, the Americans should go there and take exams and then should be able to rule India. Now, if that is accepted, that, okay, I mean, then one should be able to extend it to the nations, and you should consider various groups of people as perhaps nation within nation. And even within a family, you don't necessarily ask, okay, which son or daughter or father or mother or grandparent has the best merit. I mean, and according to that, you assigned responsibilities or something.
I think that it is true of your point that when a person like Gandhi of his stature does not talk about completely giving up caste, eradicating caste to some extent, it does legitimize it. But on the other hand, if you look at the weight of his actions on balance and what he did in his life and what he stood for on the whole, and the times he did, I think that your comments are indeed out of context. But I really have a question, and I wonder if two of you can share your thoughts on it. It seems to me at this juncture, we have two developments. One is VP Singh phenomena, who the whole Mandal Commission in the government have collapsed, and now it seems that the elections are just a few weeks away. The National Front is really basing its entire electoral strategy on the minorities and on the backward classes. I was talking to somebody the other day from Delhi, and this person happens to be rather close to the VPC camp, and says that they haven't received a single penny from any industrialist. So it seems to me that the caste phenomena has been superimposed by some kind of class phenomena here. The second question I have is that if you look at the BJP stand, which is really sort of one could call it a reactionary party, if you like, a Hindu revivalist party. It has been described in many different ways. But the BJP's platform talks about completely eliminating caste and uniting Hindus as opposed to others under one platform. So it seems to me, going back to your idea about looking at these things in the context of reformist movements that have come up in India, there are, it seems to me, two visions of what can be done about this entire question. One is the VPC question, which is to restructure India and give the scheduled castes and the minorities a real place in the political structure, not simply look at them as vote banks. And the other is the whole question of the BJP, which seems to politicize in a different way. I'd like you to share some thoughts on this.
Mark, would you Mark Galanter?
About how change should come about. This doesn't mean that reform Hindus, people of a Gandhian spirit, are the enemies necessarily. They have a different vision. It's still open as to which is more efficacious, which should be victorious, which strategy should be followed. The very fact that we still debate the issue means that none of the strategies really have worked yet. The task that all of these reformers were about are, unfortunately, our tasks, both those of us from the West as well as those from India. We are left with the burden of having to take the mantle of courage, of work, of strategy, of vision of all these great reformers and carry on their mission in the present day.
Thank you very much. I want to go to one more speaker. And it's the man, it's the man with the...
its own solution to the whole problem of caste. And if you remember from the tank episode to the burning of the Manushriti and so on, Dr. Ambedkar decided in the early 30s that the only way that this problem of caste could be changed for the ex-untouchables and our ex-untouchables was to completely reject the Hindu religion altogether. He recognized that the caste system, as we've been told, is right at the core of the Hindu religion. You can't reject the caste system and maintain the Hindu religion. So after many years of serious consideration, he decided himself personally to reject Hinduism. And he did that with many millions, or thousands initially, now millions of his followers, and moved into Buddhism. So I think this is his solution. This was his solution, and I still think this is the best solution. Dr. Dhammashala said that you can't pass laws to get rid of thousands of years of prejudice, and basically the consciousnesses of the ex-untouchables have been formed in such a way through thousands of years. The only way that you can really tackle this whole problem is by tackling consciousness, by tackling the way that people experience and see themselves. And this is precisely what the Buddha Dharma does. It actually works like action.
I am going to call time. I know a number would like to speak. Let me, in the next session that we're going to have right now. One of our speakers is not present, Dean Lelyveld. So in that next period, there will be time for further comment, but I don't want to get too far behind now. So let us take a brief break and come back as soon as you can when Professor Elliott is going to have the floor, and then I hope you'll all have time again.